It's like a convoy. Yeah.
Europe is on edge.
€1 trillion to spend on defense.
Allies have agreed to invest 5% of GDP in defense.
South Korea is set to export K2 tanks to Poland.
For many decades, the US spent the most on its defense. But over the past 10 years, all budgets went up and now Poland ranks first. They want to build the largest, best-equipped army in Europe, and they have reason to be concerned. They border Ukraine as well as Russia and Belarus. And if the Baltic states would ever be attacked, their border with Poland would be their only land connection to NATO, inevitably dragging Poland into conflict. They have become the front line of continental Europe's rapid remilitarization. But is their response to pick up arms a necessity for peace, or is it a provocation towards Russia? This is Poland's eastern border with hindsight.
We are in an era of rearmament.
Europe's militarization was set in motion after Russia's invasions of Ukraine. Defense expenditure of NATO Europe was seeing a downward trend between 1989 and 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea, but it truly escalated after 2021. Defense spending reached a record in 2024 when it grew by 18%. This is an incredible sacrifice for Poland because they cannot spend this money anymore on developing their country in another way. But still, at home, these measures are incredibly popular, and I'll explain why. But first, we must begin this story a little bit further back in time. During the Cold War, Poland was situated east of the Iron Curtain, within the Soviet sphere of influence. The Soviet Union imposed a communist government, despite strong anti-Soviet feelings amongst many Poles. They had a centrally planned economy, with prices that were controlled by the state. There was a shortage of everything, and by the 1980s, inflation had become so bad that even basic foods were hard to get. Poland had become a Soviet satellite state, a buffer between the Soviet Union and NATO Europe. But then, everything changed.
Thousands and thousands of West Germans come to make the point that the wall has suddenly become irrelevant.
The Soviet Union collapsed. This was a turning point for Poland, who now began realigning with the West. They had officially always followed a strict anti-Western line. They were branded as enemies in Western media, aligned with Moscow against NATO. But many Poles, in reality, felt very differently. In the late 1990s, they joined NATO, and later the EU. Central Europe was turning blue, and Poland's realignment with the West coincided with remarkable economic growth. Between 1989 and 2018, Poland's GDP grew by 830%, making them the fastest growing economy in Europe. But their new military and political alliances changed everything.
Russia has launched a full-scale military invasion of Georgia.
In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia.
Traveling at steady speed, they were heading towards the Georgian capital of Tbilisi.
Russia's invasion of Georgia got the Baltic states on edge. They are part of NATO, but have only a small land connection through this section of the border with Poland. Russia has an exclave on the Baltic Sea, and Belarus is still a satellite state of Russia in many regards. And then there's Ukraine. Poland's eastern border has incredible potential for conflict, but it was still peaceful on the European continent, and the threat was still mostly theoretical. But in 2021, it escalated when Belarus attacked Poland. Poland's eastern border is the new front line of tensions between NATO Europe and Russia, and in 2021 it went wrong.
Thousands of demonstrators marching through the capital city of Minsk today, deeming last week's vote totally rigged.
It started in Belarus with mass protests against the election results. Protesters claimed these were rigged, and the government violently repressed the unrest. This was condemned in Europe, but not much later, it spilled over the border. An airplane that was flying from Athens to Vilnius entered Belarusian airspace when it was intercepted by fighter jets and forced to land in Minsk. upon landing there, one of the passengers, a prominent opposition activist from Belarus, was taken into custody. This, for many European leaders, was a bridge too far. They responded by placing sanctions on Belarus and its leader, Lukashenko. He, in turn, responded by threatening to flood the EU with drugs and migrants. This is when Poland got into the mix. They have a land border with Belarus that historically was not a popular entry point for immigrants. The most commonly used routes crossed the Mediterranean or the Balkans. In the previous years, just a few dozen migrants attempted to illegally cross this border. But that would change. Lukashenko changed visa requirements for people traveling from the Middle East, making it easier for them to travel to Belarus. Most of them came from Iraq, and upon arriving in Minsk, they were guided to the border with Poland, allegedly assisted by Belarusian border patrol.
Migrants turned into weapons.
In a single month, the number of detected crossings increased to well over 3,000. Some groups called it a humanitarian crisis, calling to help these migrants. Others called it a national security risk, and Poland deployed 15,000 troops and border guards to get the situation under control. It was the first mass mobilization of the military in recent years to secure this eastern section of its border, and the number of crossings initially went down, but it remained higher than before. Poland then decided to build a fence, but here's the problem. Most illegal crossings took place on this section of the border. This is Europe's oldest forest, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and one of the last places in Europe with wild bison. The fence disrupted this ecosystem, adding another concern and topic of debate. This is exactly what Lukashenko wanted, to create chaos and division. This is a type of new hybrid warfare, and Poland is changing its strategies for defense against these types of attacks. Most of this border is now fenced, but that's not their only concern. We all hope that it will never happen, and it would definitely be a worst-case scenario. But military analysts in Poland are preparing for what would happen next if Russia decided to invade the Baltic states. The Baltics are part of NATO, and they border Russia. They only have a small land connection to NATO Europe, and that's with Poland. Most analysts point at this exclave of Russia that would likely play a major role in such an event. One theory is that one of the first operations would target to control this border, as it would limit NATO's ability to provide supplies over land to these countries. That is how Poland could be dragged into this conflict, and then Russia suddenly feels very close by. This exclave is where Russia has the main base of its Baltic fleet. There are various air bases and ground forces, including tank brigades and missile launcher units. Some estimates put the number of Russian troops in this exclave at 25,000, which is more than the entire army of Lithuania. If Poland is dragged into this conflict, this border with Russia would become the front line. And Poland is now preparing for that worst-case scenario. The mindset in Poland is shifting. More than any other European country, Poles want to assume a stronger leadership role within Europe, and they want less involvement from Brussels. A mind-blowing 3 in every 4 Poles believe that they should spend more on its military, and they are willing to pay a steep price. Over a third believe that military spending should be financed by cuts in social spending or with a new tax on the rich. They are now amongst the big economies in Europe, and their economic growth is expected to outpace many other European countries. On top of that, they are building Europe's largest military. Poland is on the way up.
Ukraine under attack.
Military operation is now underway in eastern Ukraine.
Vladimir Putin has 110,000 troops amassed on the border.
The war in Ukraine changed everything. Poland is spending billions on acquiring new weapon systems. Their goal is to drastically increase their army's manpower. By late 2022, Poland had 120,000 soldiers. They set the goal to increase this to 300,000 by the mid-2030s. By early 2025, they already had 200,000 soldiers when Prime Minister Tusk appeared in Parliament to make an announcement. He wanted to scale this up to as much as 500,000. That's an incredible challenge for a country with 36 million people. And to help with achieving this goal, they plan to give every adult male military training. Poland now joined a handful of countries in Europe where military service is mandatory, but this includes all Baltic and Scandinavian countries. Take Finland. Finland has a population of 5.5 million, but after years of policies promoting military preparedness, they build an army with 1 million reservists. That's about 20% of their population that can be called upon for active duty. And Poland wants to move in this direction. In 2026, it will start. Military training will become mandatory for all adult men, and women can volunteer to join. A main focus is their eastern border. The fence with Belarus has been completed, and Poland is now expanding this to their border with Ukraine, Lithuania, and Russia in what is known as Project East Shield. Poland is adding minefields on its eastern border with Russia and Belarus, and the Russian border is lined with a network of anti-tank barriers, fortified shelters, and bunkers. They are turning Poland into a fortress, and for many years, Polish diplomats have been lobbying in Washington to increase the presence of American soldiers in Poland. In 2022, the US finally listened to their request and decided to station 10,000 permanent troops in Poznan, just 300 kilometers from the border with Russia. I'm really curious to hear what you think. Do you think it is a smart move from Poland to prepare for the worst case scenario? Or do you think it would be better to just stay calm, lower your arms, and prevent from Russia perhaps feeling provoked and doing something rash? Poland now has a front seat in a broader trend in Europe towards more militarization, and they are on track to becoming a major European leader. So one last request, if I may. These last couple of months, we've not had a lot of luck with the YouTube algorithm, and I think this is caused by many different reasons, but one of them probably is because we have not had a lot of positive engagement on these videos. So if you could please like this video and maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, that will go a very long way. And then here are 2 more videos that you can consider for your next watch.